They don't see you yet. Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, which helps readers and writers and independent bookstores find each other, which was started during the pandemic and is still going strong today. So we have a really important and fascinating interview today with Lynne Hugo. Look at this gorgeous cover, The Language of Kin. It's beautiful, right? And it's an absolutely incredible book. So let me tell you a little bit about Lynne and introduce her, and then we're going to talk. And please, two important things. If you have questions, don't be shy. You don't have to say them out loud. We won't see your face. You can put them in the chat, and I will ask them for you. Also, please buy Lynne's book, The Language of Kin, and all of her books at bookshop.org or at your favorite indie. Okay, so Lynne Hugo is a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship recipient who has also received repeat grants from the Ohio Arts Council and the Kentucky Foundation for Women. The Language of Kin is her 10th novel and 13th book. Her memoir, Where the Trail Grows Fate, won the River Teeth Literary Nonfiction Book Prize, and her novel, A Matter of Mercy, received the 2015 Independent Publisher Silver Medal for Best Northeast Fiction. Another novel, Swimming Lessons, became a Lifetime Original Movie of the Month. More recently, The Testament of Harold's Wife was a BuzzBook Fall-Winter selection. And through the Ohio Arts Council's Arts and Education program, Lynne has taught creative writing to hundreds of kids. So I want to say that first of all, I want to say welcome, Lynne. As you know, I blurbed this book because I loved it so much. And I'm so happy to have you here. So welcome to Mighty Blaze.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be with you.
We're the ones who are honored. So I want to read something from Book Trib's rave review today, which said The Language of Kin is a beautifully written and poignant tale of compassion and love for the people and creatures who surround us. So, you know, this is an incredible novel about a lot of things. And we were actually just talking about the moral questions behind it. But what you need to know about this book is about two people who work with animals who have different views on what should be done with chimps. Should they be kept in zoos? Some people are for that. Some people are opposed. What about research if it can save lives? How do you communicate with them? But it's also about how we communicate with each other. And these two very different people also have aging mothers. And it's a broader story of communication. So the first thing that I want to ask you is, it's an extraordinary story about interspecies communication. Where did this novel come from? What was it that was obsessing you when you began to write?
Wow. I've always been really interested in the human-animal connection. So I'm sure that has just been dwelling inside me for a long time. And I have a really good friend who's a primatologist who had done field work in Uganda and Kenya, although this book has its origin with the Ugandan chimps. And I was asking her questions, so that was part of it. And I have a background as a licensed therapist. And so human communication is very, very important to me. And the ways that we sometimes succeed and sometimes really crash and burn when we try to communicate with each other. So I think it was all of those streams coming together in a river.
It's an incredible novel. Mark, one of the main characters, teaches the chimp. They have the same kind of sign language that he uses with his mother, who is deaf. That sort of electrified me to think that we can do this with chimps. And there are a lot of people where it's still sort of controversial because a lot of people feel that, well, chimps are smart enough to intuit what you want the response to be. But this book very much shows that it isn't. Can you talk about that, please?
Well, it has been accomplished with a number, not a huge number, but a number of chimps have been taught I mean, in the neighborhood of several hundred signs out of American Sign Language, and they are clearly not just mirroring because, for example, if the trainer might say, um, "What what would you like to eat?" and they will respond with the sign for a specific food. So they
It's
clearly
incredible.
have attached meaning to signs, and they're not mirroring back. Or they'll ask for a cup, or they'll be shown an object and asked, "What is this?" and they'll give the sign. So it's it definitely has been done. Chimps are highly intelligent animals. They share close to 99% of our DNA. And so, yes, that kind of communication can and does happen.
We were speaking before about how you actually taught a kind of sign language with signals to your dog. Did you think it was going to work before you did it? And how verbal with this is your dog?
Well, my my last lab was a trained therapy dog, and that's not particularly
Oh,
unusual. Um, in that a lot of professional trainers, we've taken both dogs and their labs to dog training. You know, basic. You start with basic obedience training, and then advance to up to uh, sit, citizen. I can't remember the title of it. I'm so sorry, but it's something like good citizen, uh,
mhm.
canine good citizen, or something like that. It's been a while since I've done it, and then there's advanced levels of training, but it's very common for professional dog trainers to use hand signals in concert with the verbal signal, and I think they're fairly universal. A gesture for come, a gesture for down, a stay. Um, so I don't, that's not particularly, that's nothing brilliant on our parts, to be really honest with you. I wish I could claim it, but it's not. Um,
We were also talking about before this. There is something. If anybody out there knows what it is, please would you put it in the chat because I can't remember the name. It's a kind of communication buttons for dogs. It's laid out like a mat, and there'll be all these different buttons like play now, want to eat, let's go out, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm mad. And I've seen videos of it where the dogs actually make sentences like hungry, want to eat apple or whatever. And it clearly can be argued, I think, that that's real communication, and it's really really kind of startling that what we can learn from animals. There's also was a case of a parrot. I believe it was Alex, a parrot who knew something like he had the vocabulary of a 3-year old, and he really the communication, like, it doesn't just teach us about animals, it teaches about ourselves. So I want to talk, there's something else that's really going on this novel, which is also about kids and children, and also caretaking aging parents, which is on a lot of people's mind, and how the caretaker often can needs as much help as the one being cared for, and how you prolong life of a loved one. Should you or should you not prolong it? And who makes that decision? I'd love to hear you talk about that because we were having a really fascinating discussion about this before we got on air.
well, I think that is an issue that many of us either have faced or are facing or will face with our parents.
Yeah.
Um, Knowing their wishes, I think, is extremely important, but we're also limited in what the law will allow us to do. I know, I absolutely know what my father wanted.
Did
And
he tell you, or did he have it in writing?
he was very, very, very clear. He did not want to suffer. And he he told my sister and he told me, and he went so far as to say, shoot me if you have to. You would put, when your dog is suffering at the end of a long life, you put the dog down,
That's
and
right.
that's what I want. Now, obviously, his doctor would not do that, and the law wouldn't permit us, and so it didn't come to that kind of a decision for us, other than
Mm-hmm.
my sister and I talked to the people in hospice saying, we want him to have the absolute maximum dose of morphine that you can possibly give him. I mean, we were very clear, and he had been clear with his doctor too. But really, I think the issue is what happens when you don't know what your aging or incapacitated loved one wants, and it falls to you to make decisions about care. I think that's extremely difficult. And how do you know what is the ethical and the right thing to do? Do you base it on what you want for yourself, what you guess they want? How do you make those decisions? And I don't, and in this book, I do not try to suggest what the correct answers are. I try to raise the questions because I love to give people a lot to think about and discuss. I imagine book club discussions where these issues are weighed seriously and discussed without anybody trying to prove that they're right, because I don't think there is a right answer.
I don't think so either. I think it's on an individual basis. But riffing off that, I want to talk about your two main characters, Kate and Mark, who have very different ideas, at least initially, about the what constitutes the ethical treatment for an animal. Is it zoos? Is it natural habitat? Is it a combination of both? I know this is kind of a controversial subject now, especially about zoos, but I'm really curious how you grappled with this with the two characters of Kate and Mark.
Well, I think that a lot of that was the reason I needed the two characters who were highly educated, highly trained, responsible people who both love the chimps in their care. They're both primatologists. So the sides of this are that Kate's position is that the chimps in the wild live in social groups. They parent cooperatively. They they live in troops. They have a complete society, really, and that the ethical thing to do is to stop the destruction of their habitat, which is
Right.
coming about through really human greed, the clear cutting the rainforest. We're destroying their habitat, and they are an endangered species. So her notion is this is what's ethically and morally wrong, and it's on human beings to stop destroying natural habitats. Mark's argument is that's that's not incorrect, but human greed and human
Yes,
behaviors being what they are,
they're not going to stop
it's
destroying
not
the
going to
habitats.
stop.
Right.
And other species are going extinct. And that's going to happen if we don't have zoos to preserve species and to help educate people about these animals. So both of them are really very, they're very, cogent and reasonable and reasoned, educated arguments. And there's a lot to discuss in there. What do you think? What is possible? What what could be done. And they talk, and then there's sanctuaries,
Right.
which are another option, but is that can sanctuaries, how many chimps can be saved in sanctuaries? So so those are the sides, and you I don't think there's a way to put all of that in one character and have a dramatic story, and I
Right.
wanted a novel. I didn't wanna write a scientific treatise. I wanted to write a great story that people would be engaged in or with, and be propelled to read how it comes out.
Well, it's very much about communication too, because both Kate and Mark have to bridge their own communication divide. And what's particularly fascinating is their feelings about it. A lot of them are shaped by their relationships with their mothers. And I want to add that concurrently, the chimp in the book um, also was torn from its mother. So it's really like, how do we bridge this divide? When we're really sure that we're right, how do we communicate with somebody else?
Right. Well, as you know, Kate's mother has primary aphasia. It's
So
the
she
loss.
cannot write, but she can. She, there are other ways of communication sometimes.
It's the loss of ability to understand and process and use words, but without dementia. So,
Right.
so the person is still present and and able to. As I understand it, you don't really know, um, because they can't communicate in words,
Right.
and
Okay.
there's not a way in.
Can you show emotions? Can someone with that show emotions?
I I I believe so. That's not impaired.
Okay.
Um, so you can point at pictures, if I understand it correctly, and that works with some aphasia patients. And what Mark wanted to try, as he and Kate were talking and understanding each other's home situations, because his mother is deaf and he's fluent in sign, he wondered if she could be taught sign language. So that's another an entirely different mode of communication, and she seemed to be getting the idea.
Let's talk about Eva the chimp. And I just want to show this gorgeous cover again because look at that face. Let's talk about Eva the chimp. So Eva is obviously traumatized. She was ripped from her mother. Lab experiments were done, and now she's pregnant and even more traumatized. What was it like for you to get inside Eva's head and consider what she might be feeling, what she might want? How did you do that, and what surprised you about it?
Hmm. Honestly, Caroline, that was all novelist's imagination. I didn't want.
Really? Okay. It felt very real.
Well, I don't know. How can I claim to know exactly what a chimp would
Right.
do? But I tried to keep the language very simple and very kind of gut level emotional, and think I was honestly kind of thinking about how would a toddler, that kind of basic unstructured
Right.
language, feeling, raw feeling, and reactivity, and just putting that into a language that would give people a sense that there is a sentient being in there that is reacting.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So I want to ask you, while you were writing this book, what surprised you? Did anything like pop up that surprised you or made you feel differently about the story so that you had to adjust the plot? Because sometimes, as you know, stories do sometimes take over.
That's so true. That is so true. Um, I think the importance what surprised me was the different themes that I found emerging. I had thought I was writing really about the ethics
Hmm.
regarding the animal and zoos versus the alternative. And
Right.
then I really started thinking about communication, and then these different ethical and moral issues. I saw, oh, but wait, there's that, and oh, wait, there's that, and so it kept adding layers. I think is the easiest way to describe that. So that surprised me, and then the ending surprised me.
The ending surprised me too. The ending really surprised. But you want that to happen when you write a book, right? You want it's always those discoveries that are so essential to the whole
Yeah,
creative process.
yeah.
Um, I wanted to ask: has writing this book and thinking about it changed the way you communicate with people, or even like when you see dogs on the street, or do you think about how we can bridge differences? Are you picking up facial cues or?
Well, honestly, I think I've always been attuned to that from being a therapist.
Oh,
But
right, of course.
I do think I have gotten better and better at waiting to respond, not responding quickly.
That's so interesting. I always respond quickly. Why should we wait to respond?
I'm not saying everybody else should. I think maybe I was too quick to respond before.
Oh,
That
okay.
that may be the case. I just notice I'm more willing to slow down and slow myself down and think before I either physically or mentally with my mouth push send.
What do you want the reader to think about when they finish this book in
Okay.
their own lives? Outside of the question of, zoos and our relationship with animals, and what are you hoping that people, what have you heard from people that, they are thinking about now?
Um, hmm.
I'm sorry, that's probably an unfair question.
It's not unfair at all. What I hope people will think about are how they're in so many ethical questions.
Right.
There really are multiple ways to look at it and to really listen, and not be too stuck on what they initially think. Doesn't mean you'll necessarily change your position, but I think it's really good to listen and understand where another position is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, that whole notion of something being morally right, I think there's more shadows attached to that. And as we were talking before, I think there's always, no matter what you decide, there's always a cost to it. Like when you were talking about zoos as opposed to sanctuaries, well, sanctuary is a lovely idea, but there's a cost in that there's not room for all animals. So what do you do then? But I definitely think this is something that people should be talking about. I want to talk about your cover and also your title. I want to show this cover again because this cover is just, as soon as I saw this, here we go. As soon as I saw this cover, I mean, that's a cover. How can you resist that chimp's face? And the expression on his face is just sort of haunting. Did you know that was going to be the cover? Did you want that to be the cover? Or did you have other ideas in your head first?
I initially thought, well, after the manuscript was finished, I initially thought, well, you wouldn't want to put a chimpanzee on the cover because people will just think it's a novel just about a chimpanzee, and I don't know if that's wide enough appeal. It's about so much more.
Oh, yes, it is.
And then um, the the publisher, the editor, sent me that cover and sent an alternative one also, and said, which one do you like best? I know what our team likes best. And I immediately said that one. The other
Yeah.
one was what they described as a more, I think she said, like a more traditional literary fiction cover, in that it was covered in greenery, sort of like a rainforest
Right.
side, this beautiful greenery that would be in the rainforest, with gorgeous lettering in white over it, not dissimilar to what's there, but with no chimp. Um,
Oh, I think you chose the right one. I mean, it's because the trim on this cover looks so intelligent and so haunted. It's arresting. And also because it just shows, whoops, half of the chimp's face, it also becomes much more interesting. But it's just it's one of my all-time favorite covers.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. Let's talk about the title, The Language of Kin, because so much of this book is about communication and conquering divides, and what does it mean to be, a child of an alien parent, an adult child of an alien parent, and what does it mean to be, a chimp who was torn from his mother, whose baby now is about to be torn from her. Tell me about, did you have alternate titles, or how did you, titles are always really difficult for me, so I always want to know how people think them up.
I know. Well, the first title, the working title of this book, was always Rescue.
Rescue. Okay. That's a good title too, actually.
And then this evolved because there's a line in the book. It's taken from a line in the book. Toward the end of the novel, there's I think it's Mark who who hears Eve, or he thinks it could be Eve, but he hears the chimps calling to one another in the night, and he hears the night sounds, and he says he hears the chimps calling in the language of their kin, because for so long Eve was isolated from all
Right.
other chimps and had no language of kin. She had heard um, only lab personnel, uh, and then zookeepers, but she had not ever heard her kin since she was taken from the rainforest.
That's so interesting, because I think a lot of times when people get pets, they may get one cat or one dog. But I had a friend who got a cat, who noticed the cat was lonely, and she bought the cat for the cat. And instantly it was changed, because these two cats were communicating with each other and they needed each other. And when you think about it, you have to think, well, of course, they need a broader world than just you and themselves being alone in a house. I just thought that was remarkable.
And then the other languages of kin um, are Kate trying to find a way to communicate with her direct kin, her mother,
Right, right.
and Mark and his mother being in this kind of fairly insular world with the sign language, and Honoria being limited in the people with whom she can communicate, and Mark being primary, that was her kin. And then toward the end, everybody opening up and trying to find a way to communicate beyond, and so in a sense expanding their kinship world through language.
It's incredible. It's just incredible, and it's so necessary now, because our world is so polarized. I want to ask you, do you feel that you learn certain techniques and things in writing this book that you're going to use on the next? Do you usually feel that you build from book to book, or do you feel like it's a whole new project and you don't know what you're doing? That's me.
Whoa. I don't know the answer to that. I really know,
Okay.
you stumped me. I'm not sure. Um, I'll tell you what I do notice for sure is that when I go back and read a finished copy, I say, why do I have so many semicolons in that book? I didn't need all those semicolons. So then in the next novel, there's probably a total of 3 semicolons.
That's so funny.
And then in the next book, I say, where'd all those ellipsis dots come from? Get rid of those. So I notice things like that for sure.
Okay, we have an audience question. Yay. Can you talk about what you're working on now? And why or why not? I mean, some authors are superstitious because they don't really know what they have yet. Do you want to talk about it, or would you rather pass?
No, I'm fine with that. I have 2 novels going. That the next one that I know is coming out is titled "The Sparks from Different Stars,"
Oh, great title! It's a
and
really good title.
the question that's raised in that novel is there such a thing as fate for human beings, or fate or destiny? I mean, a lot of people say, we were fated to be together. You are my, this was destined
Right.
to be. Or is free will really the truth?
That's fascinating.
So
That's there's this thing in quantum physics that says that time is actually man-made, that everything is sort of operating at the same time, really. So what we might think is destiny is just something that's happening at the same time. But so I'm really curious now. So do you believe in fate and destiny?
Oh, probably not.
Probably not.
Probably I'm more a free will person,
Okay.
I think. And then, I mean, particularly with regard to personal responsibility.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Um,
Okay, we have another audience question, which is, what writing advice would you give to your younger self? And I want to add to that because I also want to ask you, what is the worst and the best writing advice that you yourself have gotten?
oh gosh, what a great question. I don't think I've gotten a great deal of advice, other than things like lay off the semicolons. I love semicolons. I just have a thing for those. I don't know.
I'm the M dash. I'm an M dash.
M dashes too.
Yeah.
Yes, that's another.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would say the advice I would give my younger self is don't wait so long. Um, you don't have to wait till the kids are older. You don't just persist.
Right.
Persist. I could have gotten a much earlier start than I did. So that would be the first thing. And what was the
I wanted to know what the worst advice and the best advice was that you yourself have been given. And you already gave the advice to your younger self and to other writers.
all right, the worst advice I was ever given was from the editor of my first novel. Because I was working on a novel about the you remember in the 90s, I think it was, when there was this big spate of abandoned babies.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, okay. And I was working on a novel about that. And the editor of the first novel, which is the one that was made into a Lifetime movie, said, "Don't write that book. I will never buy that book. That will never be published. I have
Why?
I have children." He was a man,
Oh,
and the response was, "I have children too."
I know. What kind of a ridiculous thing is that to say?
Well,
What did he mean? Like, I would never abandon my baby.
I think he meant it was such an offensive topic to him.
He's not very compassionate, and he doesn't really understand what would drive somebody to abandon their child.
Well, and this was written from the about a woman who does that and trying to create a story that would make it not acceptable, not nothing, not a good decision. But why would somebody do that? What might have been happening? Why would a teenage girl give birth in secret, hide a pregnancy, and then leave a baby? And the baby, a lot of those babies did die,
Yeah.
as you know.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he just found that idea so offensive that, I mean, his response right away was, that book's dead in the water. And I don't think that was good advice without when.
That's terrible advice without we're talking in consideration. And actually, that's a very hot topic for a book. I
Well,
think that's so. I also want to ask you about books to movies. How did you feel seeing your characters on the screen? Was it weird? Was it how you pictured it?
no, it was not. And it was not the greatest. I mean, it was not the greatest experience. It was Hearst Entertainment. And what I learned from that was that when you sell the movie rights, you have no control from that point
Oh,
on,
that's right. Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
I did not know that.
Oh, it must have been a shock for you.
And you can negotiate in that you get script consultation. That is meaningless.
Oh boy.
So you can say, well, this is just incorrect. That could not happen, and this is why. And it just stays in. But you consulted. You said you had a chance to say that. You did. I did.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I have one last question,
Okay.
which is I always ask everybody because I'm such an obsessive person myself. What is obsessing you now and why?
Oh gosh, what is obsessing me right now? Whew. So much, so much. Okay, trying to do a good job with this book launch. Number one, number two, my two youngest grandchildren are here for 2 weeks,
Oh,
so terrible timing when you're doing a book launch. But
all
I
right.
adore them, but it's a lot. It's a lot to juggle. So that's just the way things went this time, and I would never not want them here ever. But I'm divided because I'm trying to do two things, and I just adore those kids. So there's so that's kind of, and we have our dog has been injured, and we're taking
Oh
care.
no.
So lots of things that are not focused on turning out new work at the moment, unfortunately. But I'll get back to it.
Yeah, it's impossible when you're launching a book. It's usually very busy and
Find that too.
stressful. Oh, it's really, really, so you just put everything sort of on hold. So I want to share this absolutely gorgeous, phenomenal cover again, The Language of Kin. It's a fabulous, fabulous book. Please go to your local indie and pick up a copy, or you can go to bookshop.org. We have that in the comments. And it's just wonderful. And actually, all of Lynne Hugo's books are totally wonderful. I'm sitting here fangirling like crazy. So, thank you so, so much for being here, Lynne. And thank you, everybody, for being here. And we'll see everybody next time. Buy books and read a lot.
Yes.